They don't always miss you the moment you walk away. No, that's not how it works. People miss attention, people miss excitement, people miss validation, but when you were the safe space, what they miss comes later. When the world gets too loud, when their heart starts to ache in a way they can't explain, when they find themselves surrounded by people but still feel alone, that's when they start to remember you. Not because you begged for them, not because you exploded when they left, but because you were the only one who stayed calm when everything else felt like a storm. You were the eye of it, the still center, the one who saw through their noise without needing to fix it. You didn't lecture them, you didn't chase them, you just gave them something no one else ever could: peace. Most people don't realize what safety feels like until they lose it, because it doesn't announce itself, it doesn't demand attention, it doesn't come with fireworks, it comes with a breath, a deep exhale they didn't know they were holding, and you were that breath. You were the quiet they didn't know they needed until the noise started hurting. And the thing is, you didn't do anything extraordinary. You just listened. You just showed up. You held space. You gave them presence without pressure. But here's the raw truth. People addicted to chaos don't know how to sit with peace. They confuse it for boredom. They mistake it for emotional emptiness, so they leave. They go chasing drama, novelty, sparks, thinking they can find someone who gives them more feeling. But the feeling they're looking for isn't love. It's adrenaline. It's survival. And that's not what you were offering. You were offering rest. And rest terrifies the emotionally unsettled. So they leave, or they ghost, or they start pulling away because something's missing. But the only thing that's missing is their ability to feel safe in stillness. And you embodied that stillness too well. You didn't create chaos for them to fix. You didn't spark the push-pull cycle they're used to. You didn't leave them guessing. You just gave them honesty, consistency, emotional safety. And because of that, they didn't know how to value it. But time is the greatest revealer of truth. They'll go from person to person, experience to experience, but no one will make them feel what you did. Because peace can't be faked, presence can't be performed, and safety, real safety, doesn't live in words or looks or even gestures. It lives in energy, and your energy wasn't loud, it wasn't showy, it was solid. So now they're gone. Maybe they chose someone else. Maybe they just drifted. Maybe they're pretending you never mattered. But deep down, they'll remember. Because when the dust settles, when all the excitement wears off, when they're left with someone who doesn't understand their silence, your memory will haunt them, not as regret, but as longing. Longing for the calm, the comfort, the freedom they felt with you but couldn't name at the time. That's when they'll miss you the most. Not because you were perfect, not because you begged them to stay, but because you were the only one who didn't make them feel like a project. And now, you're gone. You didn't slam the door, you didn't break anything, you just removed yourself from where your peace wasn't honored. That's stoicism, that's strength, that's masculine emotional control. And that's what they'll never forget. If this spoke to you, if you are that safe space, or you've walked away from someone who couldn't recognize it, hit that like button so the algorithm knows you're not just another lost soul out here. Comment, "I protect my peace," to affirm your power. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because this channel is the safe space you've been looking for too. Let's go deeper. Number 1. When peace walks away. They didn't lose you. They lost the only place they could take off the mask and still be loved. Picture this: someone walking barefoot through a world full of broken glass. Everywhere they go, they bleed a little more, stepping into conversations that cut, into connections that leave scars, into relationships that feel good for a moment but never truly feel safe. And then they met you. You were the floor with no glass. You were the warmth after a long winter. You were the room where they didn't have to brace themselves before speaking, and they didn't know how rare that was, until they walked out the door and tried to find it again. Hey folks, my friends, let's stop pretending you were just a nice guy or too available. No, you were the space, you were the environment where their guard could fall and they could breathe without defense. You didn't fix them. That wasn't your job. You didn't rescue them. That wasn't your role. You simply held the kind of presence that made all their emotional armor feel unnecessary. And let me tell you something. That's power. But here's the raw, uncomfortable truth. People who've grown used to walking on glass don't know what to do with comfort. When someone offers them peace, it feels strange, foreign, maybe even boring, because they've normalized pain. They've been shaped by instability, and so when they step into something healthy, like you, they start to question it. Why does this feel so calm? Why don't I feel the rush? They confuse adrenaline with affection, chaos with chemistry, and before they even understand what they had, they're already pulling away from it. That's when you see it. The slow fade, the emotional distance, the subtle shift from appreciation to avoidance. And if you're not careful, you'll internalize it. You'll start thinking maybe you weren't enough. Maybe you should have been louder, colder, more exciting. But let me say this as clearly as I can. Do not shrink to fit their confusion. You didn't lose them. They lost you. And not just your attention, not just your time, but your energy, your atmosphere, your consistency. They didn't just lose a person. They lost the only space that didn't make them feel like they had to fight to be understood. See, when they walk into someone else's world after yours, it's different. Sure, the surface might sparkle, new conversations, a fresh story, maybe even more physical excitement. But deep down, there's tension, there's pressure to perform. There's a constant sense that they have to be on all the time. That's the part they'll never say out loud, but that's what breaks them. Because with you, there was ease, not laziness, not comfort zone, but ease, flow, safety. And they walked away thinking they'd find it somewhere else. But the truth is, safe spaces don't chase. Safe spaces don't beg to be seen. They exist, they stand, and when they're gone, you feel it. Not in the moment, but in every room that suddenly feels colder, in every conversation that feels transactional, in every laugh that doesn't quite reach the chest. You, my friend, were the warmth in their nervous system. You were the one who made their overthinking shut up for a moment. And now, it's back, louder than ever. Because the energy they're with now doesn't hold them. It pulls, it demands, it drains, and eventually it collapses. That's when it hits them, not during the breakup, not during the next first date, but when they're 3 months into something new and still feel unseen. That's when your memory comes rushing back. That's when they miss you, not because you were perfect, but because you were real. So hear me now. If someone walked away from your peace because they couldn't recognize it, don't break yourself to be understood. Don't become louder just to compete with chaos. Don't let their confusion make you question your clarity. You were the rare thing they didn't know how to receive. And yes, they'll miss you. They'll miss the way you never made love feel like a performance. They'll miss the way you made them feel safe in their most unfiltered state. They'll miss the environment that existed only around you. Because it wasn't just love you gave, it was emotional oxygen. And before we move forward, declare this in the comments: I am the space. Write it, claim it, let the world know, because they won't realize what you were until they try to build something solid on top of chaos, and it all collapses. Number 2, they thought you were easy to replace. They didn't just walk away, they walked away confidently, as if your presence was ordinary, as if your kindness came standard, as if your emotional safety could be found at every street corner or in any new conversation. And at first, they even believed it. They told themselves there were better options, more thrilling connections, more exciting faces, a different vibe, a louder spark. But what they didn't realize is this: the most powerful connections don't roar. They hum quietly beneath the skin, and once they're gone, there's no volume loud enough to fill the void. You were the constant they didn't have to question, the warmth they never earned but always received, the one who picked up when they called, stayed calm when they panicked, stood steady when they wavered. You gave them a taste of emotional safety so rare they thought it was bland, because they were used to love that came with punishment. They were addicted to the highs and crashes of unstable attention, and when you didn't give them chaos, they assumed you were missing something. But you weren't missing anything. You were giving them everything they weren't ready to receive. Let's call it what it was. They mistook your depth for predictability, your emotional maturity for passiveness, your calm for dullness, and so they searched elsewhere, thinking they'd find more. But what they're starting to realize is that more often comes dressed in flash and fury, but delivers nothing of substance. It's the emotional fast food of modern connection, quick, addictive, and leaves you emptier than before. That's what they're feeding on now. Bite after bite of connection that fills the time, but not the soul. They're entertained, but they're not held. You, on the other hand, didn't ask them to perform. You didn't expect perfection. You simply offered presence. That's what made it feel easy. But it wasn't. That was the hard part. Because true presence, without judgment or control, is rare. And people don't recognize rare when they've never had to work for it. So they traded it in, for attention, for ego strokes, for the illusion of freedom, thinking they were upgrading, not realizing they were walking away from emotional gold to chase glitter. And now they're starting to notice. Not all at once, but in pieces. In moments that feel almost right, but not quite. In conversations that touch the surface, but never sink. In relationships that look good on the outside, but feel hollow inside. In the tension they carry in their body that never seemed to exist when they were with you. That's when it begins to dawn on them. That maybe, just maybe, you weren't the easy one, you were the rare one. Because here's the secret they didn't understand until now. Safety doesn't look impressive until you've lived without it for a while. It's not fireworks, it's not adrenaline, it's not wild stories you tell your friends. It's the way someone's voice calms your anxiety without them even trying. It's how you feel more like yourself in their presence than anywhere else. It's the absence of fear, the absence of games, the absence of walking on eggshells. It's knowing deeply, quietly, that you can just be and it will still be enough. But they weren't ready for that. They were still chasing the version of love they grew up around, the one that made them earn every ounce of affection, the one that rewarded emotional distance with attention, the one that punished vulnerability and praised mystery. And when you didn't give them that, they called it boring, because safety to the unhealed feels like a threat. So now they're out there, learning the hard way, watching their own patterns play out in new spaces. Realizing that emotional safety is not something you stumble into, it's something rare, sacred. It comes from people who have done the work, people who've sat with themselves long enough to not need others to perform. And once it's gone, it's gone. They thought they could walk away from that kind of energy and just find it again. They were wrong. And you stayed grounded. You didn't beg for them to see it. You didn't fight to prove your value. You let them go, not because you stopped caring, but because you started respecting yourself. You understood something they still don't. When someone doesn't recognize peace, you don't argue with them. You remove it, because peace doesn't scream for validation. It simply steps away and lets absence do the talking. Let them miss what they didn't understand. Let them taste every version of connection they once thought was better. Let them compare. Let them feel the gap. Because eventually they will. Not just in memory, but in their body, in their mind, in their spirit. They'll realize they didn't lose someone who loved them. They lost the only place that ever made them feel emotionally safe without performing. Number 3. The weight of realization always comes late. There's a heaviness that doesn't arrive at the door with the breakup. It doesn't show up in the tears or the final conversation. It's not loud. It doesn't come with a bang. It slips in through the cracks weeks later, months later, sometimes even years. And it doesn't ask permission. It just starts pressing down, quietly, slowly, relentlessly. This is the weight of realization, and it always shows up late. At first, they feel fine, free even, a little lighter, like they've made the right choice. They laugh with someone new. They post as if nothing ever touched them. They entertain distractions, thinking they've found a better fit. But none of it reaches the place you reached. None of it replicates the feeling of being deeply safe, unjudged, and emotionally held without pressure. They don't realize that what you were offering was rare because they never had to ask for it. You just gave it, naturally, effortlessly, and in doing so, they believed it must be common. But something starts to shift. Not all at once. It starts with a conversation that doesn't flow, with a laugh that feels just a little too hollow, with a person sitting across from them who listens but never truly hears. That's when the echoes begin, not of your voice, but of your presence, the way their nervous system could settle around you, the way the noise in their head would quiet down without you having to say a word, the way they didn't have to hide the messy parts of themselves because, with you, nothing needed to be filtered. That's what starts to haunt them. They miss you, but not in the shallow sense. It's not about missing your face or the comfort of your routines. It's about missing who they were when they were with you. Because you didn't just love them. You allowed them to exist, fully, freely. And now, in this new chapter they've chosen, they realize they're performing again, smiling on cue, hiding their fears, taming their truths, and deep down, something feels off. They remember the safety of your energy not as a memory, but as a contrast to everything they're experiencing now. That's when the weight begins to settle. In the middle of a conversation that goes nowhere. In the arms of someone who doesn't understand their silence. In the subtle disappointment of a moment that should feel good, but doesn't. That's when they understand. They didn't just walk away from a relationship. They walked away from home. And here's the part they'll never say out loud, the hardest part. They know they can't come back. Not because you're bitter, not because you blocked them, but because they know you don't offer that space twice. They felt it once. They took it for granted. And now, even if they reached out, even if they apologized, even if they said all the right things, the space wouldn't feel the same. Because it wasn't just about your words. It was about who you were at that time and how deeply you offered what they weren't ready to receive. That version of you doesn't live in the past. It grew. It moved on. And now they carry that realization like a quiet ache, not loud enough to break them, but deep enough to never fully go away. It lives in the songs that used to play in your presence, in the way they scan faces for a familiar kind of calm, in the way their mind drifts when they're supposed to be present with someone else. They try to shake it. They try to fill the gap. But you weren't a gap. You were a foundation. And that kind of loss doesn't heal with distractions. They thought peace was something you could replace. They thought presence was interchangeable. But now they're learning, not from you, but from absence. And absence, when it's tied to something that made them feel safe, is its own kind of pain. It doesn't scream. It doesn't chase them in dramatic ways. It just exists, like a shadow they can't unsee. They'll try to outrun it, try to bury it, try to tell themselves it wasn't that deep. But in their quiet moments, when the performance fades and the world stops watching, that's when it hits. That's when the grief catches up. Not for the version of love they've known before, but for the one they didn't know how to keep. The love that asked for nothing but truth. The connection that didn't demand a show. You were the rare one. The safe space. The emotional shelter they couldn't name at the time, but now feel the loss of everywhere they go. And maybe they won't ever say it. Maybe they'll live with that silence. But inside, the weight remains, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't recognize what they had when they had it. And realization, it always shows up late. But when it does, it settles in deep. And once it's there, it stays. Number 4, don't go back, just because they finally see it. There will come a moment in their life when the world no longer distracts them, when the noise quiets down, when all the surface-level conversations begin to feel empty. That's when the weight of truth hits them, not with panic, but with clarity. They finally see it. Not just what they had with you, but what they lost. And suddenly, the door they walked out of starts to look like home. But by then, that home has already been rebuilt, without them inside. They come back, not because they've become someone new, but because the world failed to give them what you gave so naturally. They come back not with depth, but with regret. They come back for warmth, for familiarity, for peace, but they don't come back to love you. They come back to feel safe again. And that's the difference no one talks about. Missing you is not the same as being ready for you. Feeling your absence is not the same as respecting your presence. At first, your heart might jump. The apology, the softness in their tone, the way their words finally sound like understanding, it can trick you, because part of you still remembers how deeply you cared. You remember the laughter, the late-night talks, the way they used to look at you like you were their calm in a wild world. But memory is a beautiful liar when pain lingers beneath the surface. Don't mistake nostalgia for compatibility. Don't confuse regret with change. The version of you they are returning for no longer exists. That version waited too long, gave too much, loved without boundaries. That version stayed soft in rooms that deserved silence. That version of you tolerated emotional uncertainty while calling it loyalty. You don't owe that version to anyone ever again. You outgrew it, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. And that's something they'll never fully understand. You didn't spend months rebuilding yourself just to hand your peace back to someone who couldn't hold it the first time. You didn't learn how to protect your heart, only to offer it back to the same hands that once trembled with confusion. There's a reason you walked away, and it wasn't because you stopped loving them. It was because you started loving yourself. And that kind of awakening doesn't allow return trips. Let them feel everything. Let them wrestle with the late realization. Let them watch the version of you that survived the heartbreak walk forward without turning back. Because you were never the one who left. You were the one who remained steady, present, real, until you couldn't justify your own emotional erosion anymore. That departure wasn't abandonment. It was self-preservation. They may say all the right things now. They may show you moments of softness that you always wished would come. But you've learned by now, moments don't build homes. Patterns do. And the pattern was always this. They didn't see it until it was gone. They didn't understand it until it was silent. They didn't want you until they had no more access to your warmth. And if you go back, you teach them that you can be ignored, forgotten, misunderstood, and still available. That's not forgiveness. That's self-betrayal. You can forgive them. You can even thank them for showing you what you will never accept again. But you don't reopen a door that nearly broke you. You don't offer healing to someone who saw your wholeness and mistook it for weakness. You don't step back into a story you had to fight to escape. Because peace doesn't ask for a second chance. It doesn't knock twice. It moves once, and never in reverse. And maybe they'll try harder this time. Maybe they'll give more, speak softer, stay longer. But deep down, you know that trust once shattered doesn't return as strength. It returns as caution. And you deserve more than a love that makes you tiptoe around old wounds. You deserve a love that doesn't need to be fixed, re-explained, or fought for. The hardest part of growth is learning to stay gone, not because you're heartless, but because you've become whole. And whole people don't settle where they once had to shrink. They don't re-enter rooms where their light was dimmed to make others feel comfortable. They don't return to be understood by the very minds that misread them when they were the clearest. You are not the chapter they get to reread when they finally learn to comprehend the language. You are the closed book, the lesson they didn't finish. And now they don't get to annotate the margins of your piece. Let them see it all now. Let them feel it all. But you keep walking. Number 5. You were the lesson, not the destination. There comes a moment after loss, not just romantic loss, but the deeper kind, the kind that rewires who you are, where you stop looking back. Not because you're bitter, not because you stopped caring, but because something inside of you finally understands that you were never meant to stay where you were tolerated. You were meant to outgrow it, rise above it, and leave quietly, like a storm that no longer needs to rage to prove its power. They didn't lose a boyfriend. They didn't lose a partner. They lost the space that made them feel emotionally held without having to ask for it. They lost the warmth that was offered before they even knew they were cold. They lost the rhythm that made their chaos feel softer. And you were never just a man. You were the moment they could breathe again, and they didn't see it. So now they're somewhere else, trying to recreate what came naturally with you, trying to find that same rhythm in someone who doesn't even speak their emotional language. They're smiling, sure, posting, pretending, pushing through. But beneath that image is a growing realization that comfort without connection is just distraction, that attention without presence is just noise, that chemistry without safety always ends in ache. And here's what makes this part powerful. You don't need to lift a finger. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to tell your side, because the truth is a patient beast. It always surfaces in the silence. While you're healing, building, elevating, they're reflecting, piecing together every moment where you were the soft place they didn't know how to land in. Regret doesn't come from the decision itself. It comes from realizing that what they lost was real and rare. But let's be honest, part of you wanted them to see it, not because you needed validation, but because you gave so much of yourself in that space. You wanted to believe it wasn't all for nothing. And now that they finally do see it, when the apology shows up or the energy shifts, you'll feel that old ache again, that desire to be understood, to be chosen, to be claimed. But don't be fooled. They're not coming back because they're aligned with who you are now. They're coming back for who you were when you didn't yet know your value. And that man no longer exists. That man was still in the process of learning how not to be everything for everyone. That man didn't yet know how sacred his peace was. That man was still trying to earn love through self-sacrifice. You've buried him. You've grieved him. You've grown beyond him. Now you know the truth. You don't need to be needed. You don't need to be understood by people who only understand dysfunction. You don't need to be forgiven for walking away from a love that made you feel unseen. You were the lesson, not the destination, and it takes strength to accept that sometimes your purpose in someone's life was simply to wake them up. And what they do with that awakening, that's not yours to manage. Maybe they become better for the next person. Maybe they heal. Maybe they don't. That's not your concern, because you were never meant to stick around and wait for them to grow into the version that could finally match your depth. You were meant to show them what love could feel like and then walk away when it wasn't honored. And that walking away, that's where the real power lives. Because anyone can shout, anyone can beg to be seen. But the strongest men know that withdrawal, when rooted in self-respect, becomes a roar that echoes longer than words ever could. You left without setting fire to the bridge. You didn't destroy them. You didn't tear them down. You just stopped showing up. And that silence, that absence, it teaches better than your presence ever could. And maybe one day they'll talk about you. Maybe in passing. Maybe in a moment of rare honesty. They'll describe you to someone else, not as the one who hurt them, but as the one who made them feel the safest, the clearest, the most seen. And the ache in their voice when they say it. That'll tell the whole story. Because you weren't the one who didn't show up. You were the one who showed up fully for someone who wasn't ready. And now you're gone, not out of anger, but out of truth. Because real love, love built on emotional safety, on quiet presence, on honest strength, isn't a game you play twice. It's an invitation, and once it's declined, it doesn't get resent. You were the lesson, not the backup plan, not the escape route, not the second chance, the lesson. And now they know. Number 6, your absence was the mirror. Sometimes it's not your presence that teaches them the lesson. It's your absence, because while you were there, they never had to look in the mirror. They had you to deflect the silence, you to absorb the chaos, you to hold the emotional weight they refused to carry. But when you leave, when your energy vanishes like a storm that leaves the sky clear again, they're finally left alone with themselves. No more distractions, no more emotional cushions, just a hollow space where your depth used to live, and that's when the truth gets loud. You were the mirror they refused to face, the reflection that revealed everything they hadn't healed. You didn't expose them through confrontation. You exposed them through consistency. You showed up calm, grounded, honest, and that made them uncomfortable. Because in a world full of performance, your presence made authenticity unavoidable. You didn't judge them, but you didn't join their chaos either. And that stillness, it forced a confrontation they weren't ready for, so they labeled you too much, or too calm, or too deep, just to avoid admitting the real problem. They didn't know how to receive the love they always said they wanted. But now that you're gone, the echo starts to grow. They look around and everything feels louder. The games, the noise, the emotional static of new people who smile but don't understand them. They try to recreate the comfort, the trust, the flow, but it keeps slipping through their fingers. They go back into the dating pool thinking you were just one chapter, but every new face becomes a comparison. Not to your looks, not to your lifestyle, but to the feeling. The unspoken safety, the wordless understanding, the feeling of not needing to perform. And when that feeling doesn't return, they start to ask themselves questions they avoided for years. They wonder why no one else makes them feel safe, why their nervous system stays activated, why their trust feels fragile, why they're always bracing for disappointment. That's when your absence becomes the mirror. Not because you did anything, not because you reminded them, but because your energy is now a contrast to everything else. The longer they sit with others, the clearer you become. The more they force connections, the more obvious it is that what they lost wasn't just a person. It was alignment. Something real, something they weren't emotionally prepared for, something they thought could be replaced. And it's only now they realize emotional safety isn't loud, it's not flashy, it's not something that comes with flowers and fireworks. It comes in the quiet ways you showed up, the way you remembered small details, the way you stayed calm when they tried to push you away, the way you made them feel like they weren't broken even when they were unraveling. They thought they needed excitement. But what they really needed was healing. And instead of leaning into it, they ran. Because being loved in your wholeness terrifies people who've only ever been validated in their wounds. You didn't trigger their ego, you triggered their growth, and that's what made you dangerous. Not in a violent way, but in a way that exposed the truth. Now they sit with that truth, not all day, not every moment, but in waves, in flashbacks, in conversations that don't go deep, in silence that feels more like loneliness than peace. They remember your voice when they're spiraling, your patience when they feel misunderstood, the stability you brought to their storm, and the mirror gets clearer, because now it reflects not just what they lost, but who they became without you. Not everyone has the courage to face that kind of reflection. Some will bury it, some will numb it. Others will run harder, faster, pretending it doesn't exist. But deep down, they know. They know you didn't just walk away. You stepped out of the frame and left them alone with their own shadow. You see, your absence didn't create their emptiness. It revealed it. Because you were never their source of love, you were the reminder that they had to start giving it to themselves. And now that you're gone, they can't use you to avoid that work anymore. So don't mistake their reflection for reconciliation. Don't confuse their recognition with readiness. Just because they finally see the truth doesn't mean they know how to honor it. Some people awaken only to learn how much they destroyed while they were asleep. That doesn't mean you go back and rebuild for them. That doesn't mean you become their second chance. You already did the work they refused to do, and you paid for it with your peace. Let them sit with the mirror. Let them see what you saw. Let them feel the weight of what they ran from. And you keep walking. Not bitter, not broken, just finally free from the role of being someone else's mirror. Number 7, let them miss, you rise. At some point, you stop needing closure. Not because you got all the answers, not because they came back and said everything you once begged to hear, but because you outgrow the question. You stop wondering why they didn't choose you. You stop needing the apology. You stop replaying the conversations in your head, trying to find the moment it all went wrong. Because something deeper inside you finally wakes up and realizes that their inability to recognize your worth had nothing to do with your value. You were never hard to love. You were just hard to manipulate. You weren't too deep. You were too real in a world that rewards performance. You didn't ask for too much. You asked for something they weren't ready to give. Consistency, presence, emotional maturity. And that made you intimidating. Not because you were loud, but because you were clear. You weren't playing games. You were speaking truth. You were showing up as a mirror, and that scared them more than any lie ever could. But now, my friend, this isn't about them anymore. This is about you, the version of you that no longer chases closure, the version of you that no longer explains your kindness, the version of you that no longer tries to be understood by people who only ever wanted to feel safe in their chaos, but never truly loved in peace. Because the truth is, they don't get to see this version of you, the healed one, the grounded one, the one who learned to give love to himself before anyone else could take from it. They don't get to access the man you became through the very silence they left you in. They watched you crack, but they don't get to watch you rise. That privilege belongs to you alone. You rose in the dark, quietly, while no one clapped. While they lived their lives, played their games, kept moving, you rebuilt your soul in silence, brick by brick, scar by scar. And now you walk differently. You speak less, but your presence says more. You demand nothing, but everything shifts when you enter the room. That's the power of someone who no longer needs validation. That's what happens when peace becomes your standard, not your reward. And now you carry that standard into every room you walk into. You don't chase what's unclear. You don't argue with energy. You don't audition for love. Because now you've remembered who you are. And from this place, from this healed space, you no longer wait to be chosen. You choose yourself every single time. Let them miss you. Let them romanticize your memory. Let them piece together your softness now that they can't reach it. Let them compare every new conversation to the ease they once felt with you. That's not your concern anymore. That's not your responsibility to fix. You gave them the chance to feel real love, and they walked away from it. You don't have to prove you were the safe space. Their regret already did that for you. So now, walk forward, light, steady, untouchable. You've earned this version of you, through fire, through confusion, through nights where it felt like you were breaking open just to breathe. This peace was paid for, and you will not discount it for anyone who shows up too late. You are no longer in the business of rescuing people from their own patterns. You are no longer available to be used as a lesson while they keep searching for something that feels like you, but requires less emotional depth. You don't belong in half-grown hearts anymore. You don't fit in shallow spaces. So rise softly, powerfully, quietly, and let the world adjust to the frequency you now live in. They had their chance to experience your depth, your care, your fire. Now they can only witness your glow from afar. And to anyone watching this who still feels the ache, who still wonders if they'll ever regret leaving, who still finds themselves looking back, let me remind you of this truth. You were the safe space. You were the home they didn't recognize until they were lost. And your only job now is to keep building the world that does recognize you, that does meet you in your fullness, that does feel like peace, not survival. Let them miss you rise. If this message found you at the right time, drop those words in the comments below. Let them miss I rise. Say it, claim it, make it real. And if you felt this deep in your soul, share this with someone who needs to hear it. This is not just a video, this is a turning point. You're not broken, you're becoming. And your future has no room for what couldn't see your value. Let them miss you rise.